Today we'll talk about macros, right? You're gonna have three most important macros. Is gonna be carbs, fats, and protein, right? If you're cutting, the most important thing to understand is to just have your protein as high as possible, about 1 gram per body weight. And then another important thing is the amount of sugar. Sugar will completely destroy your attempts at cutting, even if you are still having like under the amount of calories you are allowed to have, especially if you're cutting. Sugar will just kind of ruin it. So what I would just suggest you to do is reduce the amount of sugar rather than just cutting it in general. The reason being is if you've never really cared about trying to lose fat or count your calories, count your macros, right? Sugar is going to be very, very difficult to just remove out of your life, especially if you've really been into eating sugar. So the biggest thing I would just suggest is to reduce it slowly by slowly to the point where you're kind of at the point of life where you just don't really have that huge sugar craving. You just slowly reduce it, as well as finding substitutes to fill in type like some cravings, right? So like good substitutes would be fruit, right? Fruit is very, very, very tasty, very sugary as well as just very, very low in calorie. Another way to substitute sugar is using artificial sugar, and or like artificial sweeteners like stevia. They are very good at just having substitutes in general. So if you need sugar for your coffee, your tea, or there's like certain recipes of cooking that I have that would require sugar that I would just substitute with an artificial sweetener to have that same taste but less bad benefits, I guess, that comes with regular sugar. So if you're able to keep your protein at 1 gram per body weight, as well as sugar at a very minimal amount, and keeping your calories counted, you'll be able to lose fat while eating basically anything. Now, obviously, what you put into your body is going to be the most important part, right? The amount of calories in, let's say, a donut is not going to be the same amount of calories that's going to be in like just regular white bread, right? Again, sugar as well as very, very processed foods is not going to be very, very good for you, right? So even though you could use this to your advantage of tracking calories and tracking macros to be able to eat what you want to eat, just understand that not everything is going to be a good choice. In another video, I talked about how to actually pick out correct choices and how to be able to think about picking correct choices, that I would highly recommend you to go check out. So another thing I didn't really touch on is fats and carbs, especially while cutting. Reason being is because you don't really have to keep track of it very, very importantly, compared to protein and sugar, right? What I would just recommend you to do, so it's not going to be overwhelming information, is just be mindful of it, right? Don't go too crazy with the carbs, right? Carbs is very good for your body. You need carbs, as well as fats, right? So healthy fats like avocado is very, very good. But obviously don't have too much of it, right? Too much is going to hinder your ability to actually be able to lose fat and see the number go down. Just pay more attention to protein while being mindful of the amount of carbs. Now, another very like popular diet that might kind of pop up is something called keto, where basically keto is you just cut carbs completely and eat more protein. So your body has this type of effect where it's going to be using the amount of fat as energy rather than using carbs and protein as energy. Now, yes, it can work 100%, but I use can work very, very specifically just because, going back to the whole sugar thing, right? If you've never really gone about tracking your macros, tracking your calories, and cutting stuff out of your life, going from eating very high amounts of carbs to just out of nowhere cutting them completely can work for a little bit, but how sustainable is it, right? Cravings are going to hit and you're going to feel very bad about yourself when you do have those cravings and you end up actually eating some carbs and, in your head just ruining everything, right? So if you want to try keto, by all means, go ahead. The biggest thing about losing fat in general is just trying stuff, trying the as much as you can, right? Trying to get better at cooking, trying different amount of calories you can eat per day, and trying just different recipes and foods in general to satisfy your cravings, right? But just understand that it can be very difficult for someone who is very into like for me example, I love carbs. I love bread in general, and I made sure to not cut it out of my life, right? I was still able to lose 70 pounds while eating as much carbs and fats as I needed, because I just realized I just had to be mindful of it, right? Not eat so much and rather eat more protein than carbs, right? And then it kind of just worked out in my favor. Now, again, keto is a very popular form of diet. I would just recommend you to just do more research on it, find out different recipes you can eat rather than going about buying like a whole planned meal for it, right? Just because like you have to understand the sustainability, right? This is a long run. It's a hike. It's going up a mountain. You're not running from point A to point B. You're going up a mountain, down a mountain, right? Basically, it's just understands that it's gonna be very difficult to cut something out of your life completely, right? Going back to the sugar, just reduce it. With carbs, just reduce it. So how about when you're bulking, right? When you're bulking, this is when I would recommend you to look more into carbs and protein at the same time. A little less with sugar. You should still watch your sugar and how much sugar you're eating. But understand that just because you could eat 3,000 calories doesn't mean that you could have 500 of those calories in just straight sugar, right? You can, in a sense, but the results you're going to get is not what you're going to be wanting. Especially if you're trying to build your physique and look really good once you bulk up and then cut. If you bulk up with sugary processed foods compared to whole foods like chicken, rice, and just regular meats and proteins, and then natural carbs, you're gonna be dissatisfied, in my opinion, if you just go straight with sugar. So with that being said, the way to kind of look at carbs when you're bulking is you kind of need as much carbs as you kind of can get, because what carbs do is it energizes your muscles, and the whole process and the concept of bulking, if you don't know, is eating so much food that your body has so much of abundance of energy and nutrition to be able to build the amount of muscle that it's going to build fat because there's so much storage of food. So you're going to be putting your body with the best amount of nutritious foods to use before it kind of stores it as fat, and then you go on a cut to remove all that fat that kind of built up in that time of bulking, while maintaining the muscle that you gained from bulking, right? Because that's the whole thing. When you're eating a ton of food, your body has more than enough food to give out to your muscles that are being broken while going to the gym to be able to build them as big as possible, right? And then there's still going to be excess that's going to put into storage as fat, and then you'd cut to lose that fat but keep the muscle. So how much carbs should you be eating on a bulk? The general rule is 4 to 7 grams of carbs per kilogram of body weight, or 2 to 3 grams per pound of body weight. And the amount of protein would be a little higher than cutting. So cutting would be 0.7 to 1 gram per body weight per pound. For bulking, it should be minimum 1 gram to 1.5 grams per body weight, gram per pound of body weight, meaning you just times your body weight by 1.5 for the protein and times your weight per pound by 3 to get the maximum amount of protein and maximum amount of carbs you should have per day. That's just the general rule. You could obviously have some days less carbs, more protein, and vice versa. Now, what you should be fueling with your body is your choice. My complete suggestion for carbs would be stuff like pasta, rice, bread, stuff like this. Protein, like meats, right? Chicken, fish, red meat, protein powder, very good. And I would stay far away from stuff like donuts and cake for filling your car, and like ice cream for filling up your carbs. Um, Now, obviously, there's some ice cream, for example, that I've seen that's going to be low in sugar, and low in calorie ice cream. I would suggest those stuff if you have craving for ice cream, and like you really want ice cream. Go for the stuff like that, but keep them at a minimum as much as possible. Now, with that being said, I will say, as a last point for tracking your carbs and fats on a cut, as I said earlier, it's not very too important if you are just cutting in general and you're kind of bigger. You're not around that 15 to 12% body fat, which is kind of the average amount of body fat that most people have. But if you are at that number and you want to cut even more, for if you have like a competition, or if summer's coming up and you're just trying to look your best, that's when I would recommend you to look at your amount of carbs and fats more meticulously while you're going down that number. And basically, it's just keep them at a minimum, right? Keep them very low. Instead of being mindful, be actually tracking them and understanding that, okay, you should have less of this and less of that, right? And then remember, you don't need to be very paranoid about the amount of macros or the amount of carbs and fats you're putting into your body on a cut. Just be mindful, right? And if you're bulking, about 2 to 3 grams per pound per body weight. And that's it. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.